Amelia Hart was known in town as the quiet woman who rarely smiled, a professional architect who designed beautiful homes for others yet lived inside a heart that felt empty and cracked, like her own house that now stood with peeling paint and faded walls in the late autumn sun. After losing her husband 3 years ago in a tragic car accident, Amelia's life had become a routine of work, silence, and lonely evenings where the ticking of the clock felt louder than her heartbeat. Her small town adored her talent, but no one saw the loneliness hidden in her eyes, no one except fate, which was about to send someone who didn't just bring paintbrushes, but colors her soul had forgotten. On Monday morning, after debating for weeks, she finally called a local home improvement service. The man who stepped onto her porch the next day was not what she expected. He wasn't rushed, nor distant, nor overly talkative. He was calm, gentle. His name was Ethan Cole, wearing a paint-stained shirt, worn boots, and eyes the color of the quiet sea at dawn, soft, knowing, patient. He smiled politely, his voice warm yet unintrusive as he said, "I'm here about the house painting job." She nodded, leading him inside, and when he looked at the faded walls, he didn't just see paint peeling, he saw grief. Pain leaves marks, even in the spaces we live. Ethan didn't comment, but Amelia could feel that he understood something she didn't speak. For days he worked quietly, humming sometimes, respecting her space. And while she worked at her desk, she would occasionally glance toward him, noticing how he handled every brushstroke with intention, as if painting was not labor but care. Slowly she found herself lingering near the doorway, watching him. One afternoon, as she handed him a glass of cold lemonade, he gently asked, "Who lived here with you?" She froze, the glass trembling slightly, but Ethan didn't push. She whispered, "My husband," and the silence that followed was not awkward, it was empathetic. Ethan nodded softly and said, "Colors fade, but walls can be repainted. Hearts too. It just takes time." His words lingered like a breeze that opened a window in a room long sealed. Amelia wasn't used to being seen, and suddenly she found herself sharing memories she had buried. How her husband laughed, how they had dreamed of planting a garden, how grief had slowly drained her life of color. Ethan listened, not like a worker entertaining a client, but like someone who had learned how to hold another's pain quietly. As the days passed, the house began to transform, walls turning from dull beige to warm, shades of honey and soft white, sunlight appearing brighter, rooms feeling alive again. And with every stroke of his brush, something inside Amelia softened, like ice thawing. One rainy afternoon, while Ethan painted the hallway, Amelia sat nearby, asking questions about his life. He told her he used to be a painter in a city gallery, but life had changed after his mother fell ill. He moved back to his hometown to care for her and stayed even after she passed. He had lost love before too, not to death, but to life's drifting. "I learned," he said, "that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes love is what remains after someone leaves." His words felt like poetry, like truth she had never spoken aloud. As the final wall was nearly finished, Amelia realized she didn't want the project to end, because the ending meant goodbye. She found herself baking cookies, making tea, stepping into conversations she once avoided. She laughed one evening when Ethan accidentally splashed paint on himself, and the sound startled her. It had been so long since laughter felt real. Ethan smiled at her, as if witnessing a flower bloom after a long winter. But just as new beginnings take shape, fear always rises. That night, Amelia looked at the newly painted home and cried, not because she was sad, but because it reminded her that healing was possible, and that terrified her. To love again meant risking loss again. The next morning, Ethan finished the last coat of paint on the front porch. She stood nearby, unsure how to speak what her heart begged to say. "Thank you," she whispered, but the words felt small. Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle, knowing she was fighting her own heart. "Your home looks warm again," he said softly, "and you do too." Before she could respond, a neighbor called to Ethan about another job, and he nodded. saying he'd return tomorrow to clean up equipment. As he walked away, Amelia felt her heartbeat echo like footsteps in an empty hall. She watched him fade down the street, and for the first time in years, she didn't want to be alone. As evening fell, she stood at the window, watching the sky paint itself in orange and rose. She whispered to the quiet room, maybe love didn't die. Maybe it just changed colors. And somewhere, Ethan paused as if he had heard her, and smiled. The following morning, Amelia set out 2 cups of tea on the porch table, her heart racing, unsure of what she was preparing herself for. She didn't know whether Ethan would stay in her life or simply remain a chapter of healing she would someday speak of in past tense. When he arrived, he looked surprised at the tea, but pleasantly so, sitting down beside her as the morning sunlight cast soft gold across the newly painted walls. Neither spoke at first. The silence was tender. Finally, Amelia said softly, "You didn't just paint my house." Her voice trembled, but she continued, "You brought color back into my life." Ethan's eyes softened, but he remained quiet, letting her choose her words, not rescuing her from her own truth. "I was afraid," she whispered, "to feel anything again. Afraid that if I cared, I'd lose everything all over." Ethan slowly put down his cup, his voice low and gentle. "Loving someone after loss isn't betrayal, it's survival. Love doesn't replace love. It layers, it grows, it continues the story." Amelia's breath caught. She looked at him, not as the painter she hired, but as the man who saw her truly saw her. But life and love are never simple. The fear inside her rose again. "I don't know how to love anymore," she confessed. Ethan gave her a small, warm smile. "You don't have to know. We learn together, one moment at a time." He stood, offering his hand, but not demanding it. It was an invitation. She hesitated only for a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. His hand was warm, steady, and that was how it began. Not with confessions or grand declarations, but with the simple act of 2 souls choosing not to run. Days passed, but now they spent them together, not as painter and client, but as 2 people learning each other's quiet worlds. They visited the old town market, where Amelia realized she hadn't felt excited about choosing flowers in years. They walked near the river, where Ethan told her the names of colors in the sky at sunset, colors she used to design in homes, but had stopped seeing in herself. Slowly, her heart unfolded. One evening, rain fell heavy, and they found themselves sitting near the living room window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The house glowed warm with the honey-colored walls Ethan had chosen. Amelia rested her head lightly on his shoulder, not thinking, not planning, just feeling safe. Ethan didn't move or speak. He simply let her be. She realized then that love didn't have to rush. It didn't have to overwhelm. Sometimes love arrived quietly. Weeks turned into months, and the house, once silent and cold, was filled with music, warmth and laughter again. Amelia planted the garden she once dreamed of. Ethan helped her hang framed photos, not just of her past, but of new memories being made. One afternoon, while painting small shelves for the hallway, Ethan paused and looked at Amelia thoughtfully. "Do you know what I see when I look at you now?" he asked. She lifted her eyes from the plants she was arranging. "I see someone who survived," he continued. "Someone who chose to stay alive, even when life tried to pull you under." Amelia's eyes shimmered, not with sadness, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Gratitude, healing, love rediscovered. They leaned in then, not rushed, but drawn together by a gravity that felt natural, inevitable. Their lips met softly, tenderly, like a promise, not of forever, not of conclusions, but of beginnings. A few townsfolk whispered about the widow and the painter, but neither cared, because love does not need permission to be real. Time passed and seasons changed. The garden bloomed. The house stayed warm, and Amelia's heart, once cracked and faded, now glowed with colors she thought impossible. One evening, while they were sitting together on the front porch watching the sunset paint the world in amber and rose, Amelia smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep healing. She whispered, You painted my home." Ethan took her hand. "No," he replied gently. "We painted each other, and that was the truth." Love did not arrive to replace the life she lost. It came to add to the life she was still living. Love didn't erase her past. It honored it. It continued it. It expanded it. So if you're hearing this story right now, remember, your heart is not done. Your story is not finished. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means learning to breathe in a world that still has beauty, color, warmth, and love waiting for you. If this story touched you, even a little, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories that remind us love can return even when we think it's gone. And sometimes the person who enters our life to fix something small ends up healing something much deeper.